Welcome to a Yahoo Finance Special Report. I'm Shauna Smith. We are moments away from remarks from President Biden at the White House. The president is set to address the administration's sweeping new tariffs on $18 billion in Chinese goods. The move, which was announced this morning, targets numerous sectors, including Chinese electric vehicles, which will see tariffs quadruple from 25% to 100%. President Biden announcing those sweeping tariffs, $18 billion worth of Chinese imports here. Now, President Biden is expected to speak in just a few minutes in the Rose Garden on his tariff announcement. Our very own Jennifer Schomburger is live from the White House North Lawn. Jennifer.
Good afternoon, Shauna. That's right. President Biden expected to give remarks here at the White House in the Rose Garden shortly, officially announcing an increase on $18 billion of Chinese imports. The White House officially billing these remarks as promoting American investment and jobs. The White House says the increase in tariffs is key to transitioning to green energy here in the United States and increasing the number of manufacturing jobs at home. Under the direction of the president, imports of electric vehicles, semiconductors, lithium-ion batteries, and critical minerals will see levies doubled or tripled to as high as, in one case, 100% when it comes to electrical vehicles. The jump in tariffs are the result of a 4-year review mandated by the U.S. Trade Representative's office to reevaluate the economic impact of tariffs implemented under the Phase 1 deal by former President Trump. The USTR concluded that China has not eliminated many of its poor technology transfer policies and practices, and instead has even become more aggressive in certain actions, including cyber intrusions and cyber theft. China's foreign minister had this to say this morning, quote, China opposes unilateral tariffs that violate WTO rules and will take all measures necessary to defend our legitimate rights and interests. On overcapacity, he mentioned our leading edge is the result of comparative advantage and not so-called subsidies. Now, the White House says today's announcement is not political in nature and that they have been assessing China's unfair trade practices for some time. Former President Trump has pledged to slap 60% tariffs on all Chinese imports if he were elected. Again, we will hear from President Biden in moments on these new sweeping tariffs. Back to you.
All right, Jennifer Schomburger, thanks so much for bringing us the latest there from right outside the White House. Well, President Biden, while he isn't ratcheting up tariffs here on Chinese imports, he's also keeping in place $300 billion in Trump-era tariffs. Joining me now at the desk, we have our very own Rick Newman. And Rick, Jen just alluded to this, but talk to us just about the politics that are at play here and why you think President Biden is announcing this today.
I'm glad you mentioned the $300 billion that's already in place. Those are the Trump tariffs from 2018 and 2019. I mean, the White House clearly was telegraphing that these new tariffs were coming, and this lines up with Biden's policies to promote more semiconductor manufacturing in the United States, get some of the green energy technology supply chain back here in the United States, electric vehicles. But I think there was some hope that while Biden was imposing this new set of tariffs, he might relax some of those Trump tariffs. And he has good reason to do that because of inflation. I mean, those tariffs are inflationary. There have been many economic studies that found those tariffs did push up prices. I mean, you know, those are contrary to what Trump said. Those are American importers who pay those tariffs, and then they pass the costs along to consumers to whatever extent they can. And you would think Biden wants a little bit of an edge so he can say he's doing something to get inflation down now that we're in the last 6 months of the political campaign. So that is not going to happen. But nonetheless, I think what you're going to hear President Biden say when he talks in a few minutes, first, he's going to give the laundry list of everything that's great about the Biden economy. We hear that in every speech of his. And then he's going to emphasize what Jen said, trying to boost domestic manufacturing. 3 states are really important to that. Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Those are 3 of the 6 swing states that are going to decide the outcome of this year's election. A lot of blue-collar voters in those states, automotive manufacturing, other types of manufacturing. And Biden has been going after them all along. I mean, he repeatedly says that he is the most pro-union president in American history. That is clearly going after those voters. Let's remember he joined the UAW picket line when the auto workers were on strike last fall. That turned out to be a good bet because the auto workers got a good deal in the end. So he's sort of sided with the winning side. And now he's going to do this. He's going to say, I'm standing up for American manufacturing workers.
Why do you think he's targeting? It goes a little bit to what you were just saying there and really what Jen touched on as well, just in terms of the strategy here going forward. But he's not putting tariffs on anything that many consumers, many of our viewers buy on a weekly, daily basis that's coming out of China. Is it because of the inflation?
Totally right. So just to provide some context here, in the last year, we imported almost $430 billion worth of goods from China. Most of the stuff you see on Amazon, electronics, a lot of clothing, shoes, I mean, that stuff is still made in China. And Trump did not put tariffs on those products either. He avoided tariffs on finished consumer goods because, no politician wants to put a tariff on something that people buy every day. So people see, oh, the price just went up by $5. That must be because of the tariff. These were all, it's true of both sets of tariffs. Trump's and Biden's are all what you would call intermediate goods, components, with the one exception of electric vehicles, which we don't really have in the United States. We can talk more about that later. But it's components. So consumers are not going to see any price increase that they will be able to say, that's because of the Biden tariffs. Now, Trump may, try to make people think that, but that is not actually going to happen. And again, $18 billion worth of imports facing new tariffs. That's a small portion of the $430 billion that we import from China.
Very important to put that into context. All right, well, Rick, stick with us because we want to get to we want to explore this even more when we're talking about the White House's sweeping array of new tariffs that will raise duties on $18 billion worth of Chinese imports from everything from steel to semiconductors to medical products. What's the ultimate impact of this, and how does it really, or the impact that we're going to see on the political landscape? We want to bring in Jeanette Lael, Strategist, a Securities Managing Director. Jeanette, it's great to have you here. Talk to us just about the strategy behind this and whether or not you think this, or you view this as more of a symbolic move by the Biden administration.
Well, thanks for having me. And I think, as Rick pointed out, one of the things that this is definitely about is protecting domestic industry. Biden is definitely focused on the U.S. auto industry. He is particularly focused on U.S. auto workers. And since he is trying to push into the electric vehicle market and having U.S. manufacturers retool for that market, he really does want to protect that industry and make sure that Chinese electric vehicles do not undermine the U.S. domestic industry. So that's partially why you see those tariffs going up to 100%, even though we do not actually import very many of them currently. The other big thing about this is Biden is trying to create a contrast with Trump. Biden is currently losing in all 7 swing states in a 2-way race. He's losing in all of them except for Michigan in a 5-way race. This is according to the polling averages. And so he also needs to create a contrast with Trump. So he's trying to take on where Trump has priorities as strengths with voters on the economy, on inflation, on immigration. And so he is now trying to put out more tariffs to protect U.S. auto workers, to protect semiconductors, and to protect some of these other key industries that he thinks is really important. And so you kind of saw the contrast now that's coming out with Trump talking about putting 200% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles coming from Mexico. Biden now trying to say, I'm doing more targeted ones. I'm trying to specifically target U.S. industries that would be at a competitive disadvantage from these imports. And that's where you're also kind of seeing a very important distinction that he's trying to make ahead of the election.
So is this going to move the needle for Biden in those swing states? I mean, this, frankly, it kind of seems, as a political strategy, it kind of seems like small potatoes, given everything he's already tried to do to woo voters in those states. You think there's any chance this will move the needle?
Right. I think the biggest thing is Biden currently has very low approval rating. He is down in all of the polls. So right now, this election is really a referendum on his first administration, his first term. So what Biden needs to do is create a choice and say, so I think he's trying to say, I have been suffering with inflation. He does recognize that, even though he isn't really talking about it in the way I think voters want him to be talking about it. But he's trying to create this contrast with Trump. So Trump is going to put on broader tariffs. That's going to be more inflationary. That's going to be his argument to voters. I'm being more targeted. I'm specifically focusing on specific areas that will have a negative impact on the U.S. economy. Whether it's actually going to have an impact on voters, I think is to be determined. I think inflation has still just kind of soured U.S. voters on the state of the economy. Tomorrow's CPI number is going to be really important. And one of the things that we're kind of watching is just the misery index, which is inflation and unemployment. And what does that do ahead of the election? What we've seen is that most often, if you look at the year-over-year change in October before the election, if the misery index is down, the incumbent has tended to win election. But if it is up, then they lose election. So that's something else that's going to be really important. This step may not have much of an impact, but it's going to be Biden's way to try to create that contrast for himself.
Jeanette, do we know anything about what voters actually think about tariffs? I mean, does this have positive resonance, negative resonance? Is it a new idea to them?
So I think it depends also how you frame the question as a pollster. So I think voters are definitely very concerned about inflation and overall costs because they know that prices have not really gone down, even if inflation rate has come down. But at the same time, if you frame some of these tariffs as, protecting U.S. industry, going after Chinese goods that might be, hurting U.S. industry, that can have an impact. But I think for a lot of voters, they're looking more at what is going on in their day-to-day lives. What are the prices that they are actually paying for goods that they buy every day? And that's going to be a little bit more impactful than overall tariffs.
Jeanette, when it comes to what comes next, the next steps, the likely response that we're going to hear from China, what ultimately that would mean then for U.S.-China relations, how do you see that playing out?
Right. So it's interesting because Biden is trying to create this, what we've been kind of terming like a ceasefire, trying to create some sort of positive relationship between the two countries, trying to put a floor underneath the relationship to make sure that it doesn't devolve into a trade war, as we kind of saw a little bit more during the Trump administration. But now he's kind of taking this move, partially probably for electoral reasons, because he is down in the polls. And China, of course, has said that they will retaliate. How they retaliate will be interesting. They could go after, U.S. electric vehicles that try to target the Chinese market. They could go after U.S. agriculture, which tends to be a primary target for them. But there's other ways that they may try to handle this. They also may not retaliate as strongly right away. That's kind of one of the things that we've seen as Biden has made several of these announcements over the course of the year. They actually haven't been as strong in their retaliation as one might have expected. So they could be holding off until maybe after the election. They could be just planning to choose their battles as to when they want to do this. But I think that this is something that's important overall for the U.S.-China relationship, because what it is showing is that whether you have Trump in office, whether you have Biden in office, both of them are going to be looking to really target China, to try to target Chinese non-market practices, really kind of trying to focus on U.S. domestic infrastructure. And I think the other thing that's important is how quickly does each president try to move away from the reliance on China and Chinese supply chains to creating more in the United States or more with our partners and allies. Trump is probably going to be more likely to accelerate that deglobalization away from China than Biden, but either one, whoever is president, this is the path that we are now on going forward.
Jeanette, Biden's approval rating has been stuck around 40% for a long time. What could he do to get his approval rating up 5 percentage points?
Right. So, I mean, obviously, I think if the inflation numbers actually started to go down and you could actually have the Fed cutting rates, that could be a boost to him. I think the other thing is that, one thing I will say is that we are still a little bit further out from the election. So not all voters are really taking the time to really pay attention to what's going on. So what does he try to do over the next couple of months to really try to focus on helping bring costs down, maybe having, does the Fed actually help out by cutting rates? That's going to be important. There's some other things that he's going to try to do ahead of the election. But I think the biggest thing for him is that some of these things are out of his control. So he does need to make this a referendum with Trump, showing that contrast. Which policies do you want? That could actually help his approval rating. I think the other thing, obviously, is just all the things that are going on globally, what's going on with Gaza. That is not helping his approval rating either. So there's a lot of things that are somewhat out of his control. But I think if he can actually try to start to make this more of a choice election, you could start to see his approval rating increase.
All right, Jeanette Lowe, we have to leave it there. Thanks so much for hopping on with us for our special report. President Biden sitting down for an exclusive interview with Yahoo Finance executive editor Brian Sozzi. You will be able to see that interview at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We want to zero in on the impact of President Biden's sweeping new tariffs and what the impact they could have on U.S.-China relations. Joining us now, Shahzad Kazi, China Beige Book International Managing Director. Shahzad, it's great to speak with you here. We were just talking to Jeanette just about what this tit for tat exactly means for U.S.-China relations. I'm curious, from your perspective, how you think China is looking at today's announcement.
Look, these were incredibly well telegraphed. The fact is that the Chinese government is not going to be happy with this, but very little economic impact right away, very little economic impact probably next year. In some areas, zero economic impact for a very long time. And I'm talking specifically about EVs. So you may hear a lot of pushback rhetorically. You may not get too much in the way of Chinese retaliation.
Is China in a weaker position than they were in 2018 and 2019 when Donald Trump was imposing his tariffs and China was retaliating?
Well, in some ways they are. They've got an economy that is massively slowed down that they're trying to reconfigure. But on the other hand, again, as I said, it may not be in their advantage at this point to really try to fight back tariffs that don't really affect them. Again, thinking through EVs, there are no Chinese EVs in American streets today. And of course, if they're looking for a way to skirt the tariffs, two things: they could reproduce these in Vietnam or Mexico and ship them to the United States. And let's not forget, not all the tariffs are going into place today. We've got 2 years of onboarding for some of them. Plenty of time for other products to be shipped into the U.S. In between.
Shahzad, how concerned do you think China is that Europe will sort of follow the United States and impose similar tariffs so that you're getting more of a block of countries that are trying to keep some of these cheap Chinese products out?
Yeah, I think that's a real risk. And what they want to do, the attempt here is to potentially get the Europeans to move higher.
Shahzad, apology here. I have to jump in. We have President Biden. He's approaching the podium right now in the Rose Garden. Let's listen in.
Good afternoon. My name is Jesse Gary, and I'm the president and CEO of Century Aluminum Company. President Biden's announcement today is critical to the success of my company and the strength of our economic and national security. From electric vehicles to missiles, aluminum is a key component in most aspects of our modern economy and critical to our national defense. Tripling tariffs on aluminum from China, which continues to build up overcapacity and engage in non-market actions, will allow our business and our workers to compete. Our workers are highly skilled, productive, and committed, and I'm very proud of the strong partnership that we have with the United Steelworkers. We all benefit from the President's actions today, coupled with his broader approach to revitalize American manufacturing, which has greatly benefited our operations in Kentucky and South Carolina. The tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminum also advance our efforts and President Biden's efforts to make cleaner metal. Not only are Chinese products subsidized and dumped onto world markets, but they emit far more CO2 per ton than we do here at home. With the support of a $500 million grant from the Biden administration, we are building not only the first new American smelter in 45 years, but a smelter that will be one of the greenest smelters in the world, powered by cutting-edge technology and renewable energy. For my company, our workers, and others across this country, unfair trade is something that is very real. Today's announcement creates the climate for businesses to succeed, investments to be made, jobs to be created, and good wages to be paid to our workers. Thank you, Mr. President, for your vision and the work of your administration. Thank you, sir, very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Roxanne Brown, and I'm International Vice President at Large for the United Steelworkers Union. The Steelworkers is the largest industrial union in North America, so the work of President Biden and his administration is especially consequential. From mining to metals, from aluminum to zinc, from paper to fiber optics, international trade has an enormous impact on our members' jobs and their lives. Just about a month ago, we hosted President Biden at our headquarters in Pittsburgh, and there our union's international president, Dave McCall, spoke of the decades-long partnership we've had with President Biden, dating back to when he first ran for Senate. And all that time, we've never questioned his commitment to working people. He is the most pro-worker, pro-union president we've ever had. The president and his administration truly have implemented a worker-centered trade policy. He's confronted unfair trade, not only using trade tools, but also investments to regain, reignite, and renew manufacturing capacity. These trade tools are vital in stopping unfair and anti-competitive actions of countries like China. But coupling them with investments, procurement policies, and other actions is key. And that's what President Biden has delivered. He has stood up for us. From the CHIPS Act to the Inflation Reduction Act, he's doing what no other president in my lifetime has done. President Biden's trade policy is about making sure that everyone can participate and everyone can win. It is truly my honor to introduce the President of the United States, Joe Biden. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, I assume you're standing in case you have to run when the rain starts. Please, have a seat. Rox, thank you very much for all you do to fight for American steelworkers. I mean that sincerely. All right, and I want to recognize all the labor unions here today, including steelworkers, auto workers, sheet metal workers, AFL-CIO, IBEW, communications workers, boilermakers, machinists. I'm proud, as Rox said, to be labeled the most pro-union president in American history. You heard me say it before. Wall Street's important, a lot of good folks there, but they didn't build America. The middle class built America, and unions built the middle class. Folks, leaders from key American industries are here as well, including steel, aluminum, solar, semiconductors, automakers, and members of my cabinet are here as well. Janet Yellen, the front row is Murderer's Row here. Treasury Department, Julie Su, of Labor, Catherine Tai, our nation's trade representative, and outstanding members of Congress as well. From Michigan, Debbie Stabenow is here. Debbie, welcome. And Haley Stevens is here. No, I guess there you are. You did make it. They told me you might not be able to make it. I'm sorry. All right. And Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Again, you smile, Debbie. It's okay. Lisa Slotkin. Well, you should be. You're responsible for a lot of this. Thank you for joining us as I announce a series of actions to make sure American workers and American business and corporations can compete and win in the industries of the future, because that's what this is about. The fact is, American workers can outwork and outcompete anyone as long as the competition is fair. But for too long, it hasn't been fair. For years, the Chinese government has poured state money into Chinese companies across a whole range of industries: steel and aluminum, semiconductors, electric vehicles, solar panels, the industries of the future, and even critical health equipment like gloves and masks. China heavily subsidized all these products, pushing Chinese companies to produce far more than the rest of the world can absorb, and then dumping the excess products onto the market at unfairly low prices, driving other manufacturers around the world out of business. You know, I won't go into it, but we were talking today about how many aluminum plants there used to be and how many there are now. The price is unfairly low because Chinese companies don't need to worry about a profit, because the Chinese government subsidized them and subsidized them heavily. And the Chinese relies on other anti-competitive tactics as well, like forcing American companies to transfer their technology in order to do business in China. I spent a lot of time with Xi Jinping. Early on, I told him, he said, why am I being unfair with China? Not unfair. I said, look, we'll play by the same rules if you want. If you want to do business in China, you got to have a 51% Chinese owner. You got to provide access to all your intellectual property, et cetera. You want to do that in America? With silence. Sometimes they just outright steal through cyber espionage and other means. And it's been well documented and internationally recognized. And when you make tactics like these, you're not competing. It's not competition, it's cheating. And we've seen damage here in America. To name one example, back in 2000, when cheap steel from China began to flood the market, U.S. steel towns across Pennsylvania and Ohio were hit hard. And any of you from those areas know well. More than 1,800 iron workers and steel workers in Pennsylvania and Ohio lost their jobs. I'm not going to let that happen again. That's why today I'm announcing new tariffs in key sectors of the economy that are going to ensure that our workers are not held back by unfair trade practices. They include the thing I'm announcing today, 25% tariff on Chinese steel and aluminum products, and we'll counter China's overcapacity in these industries. And we're making major investments in clean American steel and aluminum. Clean American steel and aluminum. It's a big deal. Clean because of the way we manufacture it here. It emits half as much carbon as steel made in China. Last month, my administration announced the largest investment in clean manufacturing in all of history, up to $1.5 billion in 6 clean steel projects across America, creating and supporting thousands of union jobs. Next, a 100% tariff on electric vehicles made in China. People say, wow. Because we're not going to let China flood our market, making it impossible for American auto manufacturers to compete fairly. We're also implementing a 25% tariff on electric vehicle batteries from China and a 25% tariff on critical minerals that make those batteries. Folks, look, I'm determined that the future of electric vehicles will be made in America by union workers, period. And we'll do it by following international trade laws to do it. American companies are investing tens of billions of dollars in electric vehicles and batteries. And thanks to my bipartisan infrastructure law, we're building a network of 500,000 charging stations all across America, creating thousands of IBEW jobs across America. Electric charging stations. The reason to do this is simple. Electric charging stations have to be as easy to find as a gas station. And that's what this will be. You're not going to have to worry about it. You're taking off and you're not going to be able to make it all across the country without having to figure something else out. Our partners around the world are making similar investments. They also want supply chain for electric vehicles that isn't dominated by unfair trade practices from China. America can continue to buy, Americans, I want to make this clear, notwithstanding what the other guy's saying, can buy any kind of car they want, whether it's gas, electric, or hybrid. But we're never going to allow China to unfairly control the market for these cars, period. Next, we're going to raise tariffs on Chinese solar panels from 25 to 50%. Here again, because the Chinese government is subsidizing excess capacity, they're flooding the market. They're driving manufacturing companies out of business in Europe. But we won't let that happen here in America. We're putting a 50% tariff on semiconductors made in China. These are those tiny computer, all of you know this, but for the public, those little tiny computer chips, smaller than the fingertip, that power everyday lives. Everything from smartphones to automobiles to dishwashers, satellites. Look, America invented these chips, but over time we stopped making them. We invested overseas. Now, thanks to my CHIPS and Science Act, one of the most significant investments ever in science and technology, we're bringing this vital industry back home where it started, in the United States of America. And finally, we're putting tariffs on health equipment like masks and gloves that nurses and doctors wear every single day. The pandemic taught us anything. We need to have a secure supply of essential supplies here at home. Folks, these key sectors, my administration is combining investments in America with tariffs that are strategic and targeted. It's a smart approach, Compare that to what the prior administration did. My predecessor promised to increase American exports and boost manufacturing, but he did neither. He failed. He signed a trade deal with China. They were supposed to buy $200 billion more in American goods. Instead, China imports from America barely budged. And now Trump and the MAGA Republicans want across-the-board tariffs on all imports from all countries if reelected. Well, that would drive up costs for families on an average of $1,500 per year each year. It simply doesn't get it. For years, I've heard many Republicans, even Democratic friends, say China's not on the rise. China is on the rise. America's falling behind. I've always believed they got it wrong. America's rising. We have the best economy in the world, and since I've come to office, the GDP is up, our trade deficit with China is down to the lowest level in over a decade, and we're standing up against Chinese government unfair economic practices now. At the same time, we're standing up for peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits. I've revitalized our partnerships with Pacific allies and India, Australia, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Pacific Island nations. I've made sure the most advanced American technologies we develop or invent can't be used by the Chinese government to undermine our national security. Frankly, before it rains, for all this tough talk on China, it never occurred to my predecessor to do any of that. Bottom line, I want fair competition with China, not conflict, and we're in a stronger position to win that economic competition in the 21st century against China than anyone else because we're investing in America again, in American workers. Let me close with this. I come from Scranton, a town like a lot of working class, middle class neighborhoods all across America. Like Racine, Wisconsin, which I visited last week. Once a manufacturing boom town until trickle-down economics came along and the middle class in Racine got hollowed out. 6 years ago, my predecessor showed up carrying a golden shovel, promising, thanks to his new $10 billion manufacturing complex, would be built in Racine. He said it would be the eighth wonder of the world. Big promises that never came true. He used that golden shovel to dig a hole, and then he fell into it. Well, it's not on my, that's part of my, well, I'm delivering for Racine. Thanks to the investment of my administration, Microsoft is investing billions to build a new data center in Racine, creating thousands of good-paying jobs. Because the view from Scranton and towns like it are a lot different than from Mar-a-Lago. It's a view where that money doesn't determine your worth. Everyone's entitled to be treated with dignity and respect, and everyone deserves a fair shot. We leave nobody behind. That's the America we're building together. That's why I've never been more optimistic about our future, and I'm really going fast because of the rain. That's why we have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America. And there's nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. God bless you all, and better get out of the rain. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Oh, we got to
I'll take our questions there.
Mr. President, please sit. Please sit.
Please sit.
That was President Biden speaking out on his tariff announcement. I'm here with Yahoo Finance senior columnist Rick Newman and Yahoo Finance autos reporter Pras Subramanian. And guys, we were just listening to President Biden here over the last several minutes. He started the talk here, the speech, with saying that he is the most pro-union president in American history, not something that we haven't learned before. But he went on to say as to why he thinks this approach makes sense. That it is strategic. He criticized what happened under the Trump administration, why he thinks this is going to be effective. I'm curious, Rick, what stood out to you in this speech?
He tried to do what one of our prior guests said he needs to do, which is differentiate himself from Donald Trump. So he talked a lot about what Trump tried to do, which was basically across-the-board tariffs. He did indicate that he is taking a targeted and strategic approach. I think he used both of those words. And I think that's actually true. What I noticed is he definitely name-checked the three swing states that we mentioned before. Pennsylvania, he mentioned Ohio. He's not going to win Ohio this year, but Pennsylvania. At the end, he talked about Racine, Wisconsin, and Trump falling into the hole that he dug at the groundbreaking for the Foxconn plant there. That was what he was talking about that ended up not getting built. And then I don't know if he said the word Michigan. He should have, but he did say hi to Debbie Dingell, who is a well-known representative from Michigan. So he got some reference to all three of those swing states in there, and that's the political strategy behind this move, which is to protect domestic industries, particularly in those swing states. He needs to win in November.
And also, just building on that, he was talking a lot about just why it makes sense in terms of the EV landscape right now, competition, and what's not so much happening today, but what could ultimately happen within that industry years from now, and also draw some comparisons to what had happened with the U.S. steel industry years ago, when obviously we did see outside competition, and we obviously know what happened, the pressure that industry had been under.
Yeah, he name-checked where's aluminum mills, where are the steel mills? They're all missing now, and he mentioned a couple of times today during the speech, it's not fair. The Chinese are cheating. We're standing up for America. And when he mentioned the tariffs on the EVs, Chinese EVs, he got applause. There's applause there. I know there's a lot of partisans there, but that line got applause, and I think that's part of the whole message. It's not just for America in general. Obviously, it's Ohio, it's Michigan, it's those states where the auto manufacturing is a key component there to their economy. So, I'm not surprised that he got that applause there. I'm not surprised how much fairness and the Chinese are cheating and how they don't want to play fairly. This is all part and parcel of the same rules of manufacturing that happen here and in China. But also, you mentioned sort of the future, right? Right now, there aren't any Chinese EVs, right? They don't exist really. Just one company makes a few thousand.
Here in the United States.
Yes, United States. Eventually, there might be, but this sort of buys some time for U.S. manufacturers potentially to up their game, make their EVs cost effective, and then maybe you might see some Chinese EVs come back. You might even see some Chinese EVs come in with 100% tariff because they're already so cheap. We'll see, but I, at this point, don't think we're going to see any Chinese EVs anytime soon with these tariffs in place.
So, Praz, you and I have talked about this offline. Chinese companies building vehicles in Mexico, which is something you hear a lot about in the industry. And they don't need to be electric vehicles. It could be, Biden's focused on electric vehicles. I mean, just plain Chinese vehicles, gas-powered, whatever, are a threat to the United States. Is this something that's going to happen, do you think? Chinese companies manufacturing in Mexico to take advantage of the free trade agreement we have with them?
We've heard experts say that this could happen. This is the back door through Mexico. You can use the USMCA to build vehicles down there and import them to the U.S. And it's part of the USMCA. It should be fine, no tariff. But with Chinese vehicles, it's a new game. I mean, some people think that's a possible way to bring those vehicles in there. One of the experts I spoke to from the Peterson Institute, Gary Huffbauer, said that he thinks that Biden would do an executive order to block that, or some sort of legislation to block that back door. So, are you going to violate the USMCA then with this kind of executive order? I think there's ways to still protect American jobs here, but it might be in violation of some of these free trade agreements.
Yeah, there's also been calls for an all-out ban too, as well, right?
Yes,
Senator Sherrod Brown has floated that and has pushed that as something that he thinks at least should be considered.
This all highlights.
Ohio, right?
Yeah, in Ohio. By the way, this all highlights the fact that American automakers are at a cost disadvantage. I mean, and with the deal they did last year with the auto unionized workers, and by the way, we're possibly seeing more unionization. We're seeing it in Tennessee with Volkswagen, possibly with Mercedes in Alabama. Mm-hmm. That is just raising costs. And I think it's almost getting to the point that if unionized auto plants in the United States, the only vehicles they can make that they can make a profit on with the higher labor costs are SUVs, big SUVs, and pickup trucks. I mean, Ford's getting out. Chevy just said they're not even going to make the sedan anymore. You've been writing about that, but it's almost like we have a lack of cheap vehicles in the United States, and that's part of what's going on here.
So to quickly add, Stellantis, right, one of the big three automakers, is actually partnering with a Chinese automaker, Leap Motor, to build vehicles for the European market. So there are ways to sort of, if you can't beat them, join them, right? Potentially, a lot of GM and Ford have JVs with Chinese EV makers and automakers in China. Why can't they partner with them to actually make cheap vehicles, and then both sides can sort of potentially survive? We'll see.
We'll see. All right, we have to leave it there. Thanks so much for watching our Yahoo Finance special report. Special thanks to Praz and Rick for sticking around for that. And you don't want to miss President Biden sitting down for an exclusive interview with Yahoo Finance executive editor Brian Sozzi. You'll be able to see that interview live at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Stay tuned. Market Domination with Julie Hyman and Josh Lipton. That's coming up at 3 p.m. Eastern Time this afternoon. See you then.